Hello, my name is Chris Bagby. I'm a sergeant at the Bakersfield Police Department. My thesis is titled Beyond Reform, Better Policing Through Systems Thinking. A while back, I had cause to study pattern and practice reform in law enforcement, and I was struck with the consistency of the almost boilerplate approach to complex and unique policing problems across the United States. I found it unusual because despite the similarities of police organizations, I know from experience police departments are completely unique in many ways. Were that not enough to give me pause, I started to notice agencies where key reforms were happening but seemed to result in very little in the way of positive change. Reform, especially mandated reform, is an expensive, obtrusive process, and I wanted to understand why reform, despite the cost and almost uniformly consistent approach, didn't seem to work. I wanted to study ways to improve policing in ways that reform in the current model do not. While studying at the Center for Homeland Defense and Security, I discovered systems theory and became enamored with the concept of complex adaptive systems and systems thinking. To keep it simple, systems theory studies things as wholes, not the sum of their parts. System theory portrays the essential character of a thing by how it functions when the sum of its parts work together. As such, it sees the world as a series of interconnected, networked, and nested wholeness. Systems thinking is an outgrowth of systems theory. It is a paradigm for recognizing the different kinds of relationships and effects that exist in the networked nature of systems and the unexpected unknown relationships that result. With systems thinking, we can begin to understand that everything is connected in some way. Thinking this way is particularly useful in dealing with complex relationships and is increasingly being used to explore social systems and society at large to help explain some of its most difficult problems. For my thesis, I chose to combine my curiosity about improving policing, reform, and systems thinking. The result was my research question: how can systems thinking improve policing? My thesis began on three important premises. First, police organizations are complex adaptive systems. Complex adaptive systems are systems that constantly change based on their environment. They are always in a state of adjustment, and the relationships and outcomes are often nonlinear, unexpected, and uncertain. Police organizations are affected by, interconnected with, and effective of other human systems that make up our societies. There is very little research in applying systems theory and systems thinking to policing. The second and third premises we've already discussed. Police reform intends to change or alter police behavior for the better, and in America, it has never been very effective. Each chapter of my thesis looks at what traditional reforms attempt to do through the lens of gap analysis. A gap analysis attempts to understand the space between what is intended and reality and attempts to bridge that gap with solutions. Management and supervision of police personnel is a critical tenet of police reform. Generally, the rationale supporting this approach is the idea that better managed police departments will present less undesirable behaviors, discipline issues, and chaos. As a matter of practice, there is some question whether this approach does more to limit good policing than it does to prevent bad policing. It is important to understand that police organizations as living systems interconnected with a myriad of other living systems, even in the best situations, because of the involved people interacting with other people, they are volatile and unpredictable. High reliability theory explains that while complexity cannot be overcome, the damage created by unexpected outcomes can be, to a degree, mitigated. System managers can create tightly controlled system structures that capture and eliminate undesirable micro-accidents to prevent large-scale system failures. W. Edwards Deming studied improving system structures and high performance through optimization and constraint management. In part, Deming's work became known as the theory of profound knowledge, which involves four distinct elements. First, managers must intentionally manage systems. Second, embracing the nature of systems and their variable characteristics helps managers cope with and seize opportunities within systems. Third, accept only as true that which can be proven, a way of saying systems must be effectively monitored. Lastly, in living systems, the psychology of people is very important. Deming's work is key in demonstrating that well-designed, strong system structures promote highly reliable, adaptive, productive, and efficient systems. Police reform relies on the training and education of police officers as a major component of its efforts to improve policing. This approach fails to acknowledge the nature of police systems and the roles of agents in those systems. Police reform consistently fails to prevent bad police officer behavior or replicate ideal officer behavior. It's obvious that a system structure can influence a system's behavior. It's less obvious, but equally true, that a system's behavior positively or negatively affects the reliability of a system's performance. Finding ways to get system agents, in this case police officers, to become aware of their role in the system, the effects officers can have on them, both good and bad, is central to positive outcomes for police systems. 3 potentially valuable approaches are: first, put simply, create a system in which police officers learn from their own and others' experiences and where those lessons aren't lost over time. Secondly, shared visions emphasize a culture of continuous improvement and perpetual adjustment and empower practitioners to take ownership of their space. Lastly, rather than teaching police officers how to respond to stimulus, focus on teaching them how to learn, how to interact with experience, education, doing and watching others. Practitioners who can learn can become reflective. A system's context is its environment. Awareness of a system's environment, its relevant nested systems, is vitally important to its success at doing what it is supposed to do. Whether it is internally, its subsystems or micro context, or externally, its supersystems or macro context, a system's environment can dilute or constrain it from achieving its goals or propel it to the idyllic behavior. My thesis looked at a variety of contexts and nested systems that interact with the Seattle Police Department. Sparing a full recounting of the details, the case study suggested evidence that Seattle's government goals, the federal government's consent decree's goals, and those desired by the people who live in Seattle are misaligned. By serving 3 masters and adhering to an impossible motivation, specifically a sentiment-based conception of social legitimacy, Seattle has in many ways surrendered its institutional legitimacy and with it the goodwill of its people. A way forward for Seattle and a lesson for policing in general is to focus on setting strategic goals that capture primarily law enforcement's essential purpose, its ideal state. Doing so would allow police to maintain a tactical agency over the act of policing while developing a strategic voice to serve as its influence among the many competing interests. This approach might stabilize the contextual variance and balance competing social goals. In this way, police systems may find institutional and social legitimacy more manageable. Nearly all reforms focus on internal police operations in some way, including demanding that they become better at engaging communities. Police organizations have pretty much always failed to really connect with people, community, and social groups. The lack of connections limit their resilience when unexpected things happen. Feedback is essential for highly functioning systems. To be effective, systems must seek and receive as much reliable, interpretable feedback as possible and act on it as quickly as is practical. The more access and interaction a system has to feedback, the more it can learn, adapt, and respond to its environment. Feedback comes in all forms. In complex systems, it can be direct or indirect. The trick is to learn what is reliable and what is not. For police organizations, data and people make up critical sources of feedback for both internal and external purposes. Open system boundaries increase feedback. Police organizations can improve feedback by seeking it programmatically from wide, varied, far-reaching, and non-traditional sources. As I hope is clear here, my research indicates that there are innumerable ways in which systems thinking paradigms can help improve policing in ways more traditional reform efforts have struggled. My recommendations include 1, creating a system-based management platform, 2, improving agent competency through system awareness and ownership, 3, accounting for and having a clear understanding of nested systems and context for informed goal setting based on the ideal state of a system, and 4, recognizing the preciousness of feedback from both internal and external sources. Pursue it as an organizational priority. The real power of the research is the nature of systems themselves. Understanding the whole of a system is more powerful than tinkering with the sum of its parts. As such, combining these recommendations to work together within police systems rather than focusing on one or another would create robust police systems. These systems would have an inherent reflexive ability to function as part of the world rather than apart from it, and could render the need for police reform as an institution generally obsolete. Lastly, my research begins a conversation about the seemingly limitless potential for theoretical and practical research in the philosophical, strategic, operational, tactical, and individual applications of systems thinking in law enforcement and complex human adaptive systems that interact with society and any of the Homeland Security enterprises.